Did he seriously just say that with everyone listening? The words echoed in my mind long after the conference room emptied out just an hour earlier. I had been presenting the Q4 retention growth figures when Barrett sharply raised his hand, clearly impatient, and cut me off right in the middle of my sentence. "Let's not waste time on minor contributors," he said. It hit me like a slap in the face. The silence that followed was deafening around the table. I caught glimpses of eyes flicking toward me, then quickly darting away, like people witnessing a car crash, too scared to intervene. My cheeks burned with embarrassment, but I held my ground. I capped my pen, closed my notes, and nodded silently. Fine. Let the storm blow over. That's something you learn fast growing up in boardrooms. Survival means staying still when every part of you wants to scream. I walked back to my office on the 21st floor, enclosed by glass walls that once felt like windows to progress, but now just seemed like a cage outside. Seattle's skyline shimmered beneath a gray sky inside. I sat at my desk with my laptop humming over quarterly spreadsheets glowing green with data I had built. Data that saved the company from a second straight-down quarter. I was deep into a projection model when the door suddenly slammed open behind me. No warning. Just that sharp crack slicing through the quiet, like tension snapping in two. Barrett Quinn. His presence filled the room even before he spoke. The kind of man who thought interrupting was a sign of leadership. He strode across the room and threw a thick folder onto my desk. It slid across the surface and bumped my coffee mug. "Nova, we need to talk. Now." My fingers clenched slightly on the desk's edge, but my face stayed calm. "Of course," I said, gesturing toward the chair opposite me. He didn't sit. "The board's decided to restructure the leadership team," he said, voice clipped and rehearsed. "We're moving in a new direction, frankly. We need leaders, not analysts, people who inspire, not just execute." I blinked. "You're letting me go," I said flatly. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's not be dramatic. You've been released effective immediately." No recognition of the retention numbers, no mention of the software I spent 6 months developing with my team. Just him looming over me like a line item he was eager to delete. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why I had learned long ago how to wear silence like armor. "I see," I said, voice steady, controlled. He hesitated, maybe expecting me to fight, then landed the final blow. "Your access ends at 5 p.m. HR has your exit documents, badge, and laptop." He spun on his heel and left. I sat there for a long time, motionless, eyes unblinking, because something deeper than anger was settling inside me. Something sharper. And Barrett had no clue what he'd just triggered that night. I didn't go out. No drinks, no tearful calls to old colleagues, no social media posts hinting at betrayal. I simply went home, passing the coffee shop where I used to stop on late work nights. Past the corner where my mom and I once stood in line to buy our first Orion Grid-branded solar lantern. My apartment wasn't large, but it was mine. Simple, practical, a second-floor unit above a bookstore that always smelled of cinnamon and ink. As I shut the door behind me, the silence hit me like a wave. No Slack pings, no back-to-back meetings, just the soft creak of floorboards and the distant hum of Seattle traffic drifting through the window. I hung up my coat, kicked off my heels, and moved to the corner of the living room where I kept the things that still mattered. Photos, notebooks, and one framed picture untouched for months. It stood beside an old fern I'd never watered properly. I picked it up carefully, brushing off the thin layer of dust on the glass. There she was, my mother, standing beneath a white banner that read, "Orion Grid Launch Site." One clean power begins here. She looked younger than I remembered, wearing the same navy blue blazer she'd let me play dress-up with when I was 6. Her smile in the photo was wide, full of hope, but slightly worn around the edges, like someone underestimated one too many times, but still showed up anyway. She held giant scissors mid-cutting the ceremonial ribbon, her other hand resting on my shoulder. Tiny 5-year-old me, wearing oversized safety goggles, beamed up at her like she had just invented the sun. "Hi, Mom," I whispered, voice catching slightly. I carried the frame to my desk and sat down, opening the bottom drawer where I stored old paperwork and things I couldn't quite throw away. Tucked between a file labeled Old Contracts and a wrinkled product prototype sketch was a small velvet box. I opened it. Inside lay a tarnished bronze pin, my mother's old Orion Grid Founder's badge. The enamel was chipped at one corner. The clasp on the back was bent slightly, but the words still gleamed. "Believe in builders, not just managers." She had told me that 100 times, sometimes after tough meetings, sometimes while braiding my hair before school. "Managers count," she'd say, "but builders change the game." I held the badge in my hand and leaned back, letting memories wash over me. I remembered one afternoon, maybe when I was 10, when she took me into a lab filled with circuit boards and thermal units stacked like Lego bricks. She knelt beside me, picked up a small chip and said, "This little thing controls how fast a battery learns. It seems simple, but it's everything, just like people. Nova, the smallest things often hold the most power." That stuck with me now. Sitting alone in the dark, I wasn't sad like people expected. No tears, no broken mugs, just a quiet ache spreading across my chest. The kind you don't run from because it's made of equal parts love and longing. I closed the box, kissed the edge of the frame, and placed both next to my laptop. "Mom," I said softly. "I tried, I really did." I traced my thumb over the photo one last time, her face lit by flash and faith. "And I'm not done yet." Barrett Quinn walked into Orion Grid like he already owned it. It had been 6 months since my mother's memorial, and the board was still fumbling, searching, as they said, for new direction, outside perspective, and data-driven transformation. All the buzzwords that sounded great in press releases, but felt like knives to someone who had grown up watching something built from scratch. He showed up on a rainy Thursday wearing a custom-tailored navy suit, offering a confident handshake that lingered just a bit too long, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. That kind of smile that makes people lean in without realizing they're leaning at all. He called his first town hall meeting Vision Reimagined. I sat in the second row, hands folded in my lap, doing my best to keep my expression unreadable. The lights dimmed, and a sleek slideshow appeared on the giant monitor. Buzzwords flashed across the screen in polished fonts: agility, precision, market mastery. Then came the charts, graphs, and inflated projections. Everything about the presentation was polished, professional, and slick. He spoke with the practiced ease of a veteran politician and the kind of charm that perfectly timed his own laughter at his jokes. "I'm not here to reinvent the wheel," he declared at one point. "I'm here to strap rocket boosters onto it." The room responded with light laughter, yet beneath that charm, I could already feel the shift. The subtle exchange of substance for appearance, strategy giving way to spectacle. Initially, the changes were minor. Weekly metric reports were posted openly on a company dashboard, color-coded to motivate senior engineers, were encouraged to step down, replaced by flashy hires from companies that prized speed over depth. But then the true cuts began. Employees who'd been here since the warehouse first opened, who worked weekends and soldered panels by hand, started vanishing when machines jammed one after another. Names dropped from the organizational chart. Then there was Maya, who used to carry me on her hip through the halls while my mother prepared for investor meetings, who secretly passed me gum from her desk and held me close when I was too tired to smile. Maya, who'd been here longer than anyone except my mom. Barrett called it streamlining operations. I called it Erasure no goodbye emails. No farewell celebrations. Just gone when I inquired with HR, they offered nothing but a hollow bureaucratic shrug. She'd accepted an early retirement package, standard procedure. I swallowed hard, nodded, and walked away. That evening, long after everyone had left, I lingered in the office, standing before the mirror in the executive lounge. I stared at myself under stark, fluorescent lighting, dressed in a sharp black blazer, pressed pants, flawless makeup, and perfect posture. I looked the part, but I didn't feel it. All I could see was someone silently witnessing the dismantling of something precious, piece by piece. Because what else could I say? Every time I spoke in strategy meetings, Barrett thanked me for my thoughts before moving on to someone louder. He'd recycle my ideas a week later, framing them as his own. With that practiced politician's smile, the room applauded one morning. During a quarterly roadmap session, I proposed a model for long-term client retention based on usage data. He glanced at me and said, "Interesting, Nova. But remember, legacy doesn't win markets. Precision does." It was deliberate, calculated, sharp enough to leave a mark without drawing blood. He wasn't simply cutting jobs. He was erasing history. I sat there silently, fists clenched beneath the table, jaw set tight, knowing that pushing too hard would make me the next to go, because the board viewed him as the future and me as a mere footnote. Not ready yet. But I would be one day soon. That suit would fit me for real. Not just on the surface. This was the project that should have changed everything. After 6 grueling months, countless nights beneath cold fluorescent lights, and more coffee than anyone should admit to drinking, we finally delivered the hybrid energy storage system, Novacell described as a scalable, self-regulating power unit capable of adapting in real time to unpredictable usage spikes. A mouthful on paper, a miracle in practice. It stabilized our pilot plants in Texas and Nevada, cut customer complaints by 43%, reversed a declining Q2 into a record-breaking Q3. It saved us. Yet none of our names appeared in the press release. Not mine, not Kevin's who coded the adaptive AI from scratch, not Priya's who re-engineered the thermal layer, not a whisper of the 23 people who poured their blood into this launch. Instead, there was a celebration. Barrett called it a toast to strategic excellence, held in the glass-walled conference room on the 22nd floor, the one with that ridiculous skyline view none of us ever had time to enjoy catered hors d'oeuvre, overpriced champagne, a faux string quartet in the corner, everyone dressed in black and silver. We were all drained. I wore my battle-ready tailored suit, hair pulled back in a low bun, lipstick that made me feel armored. My smile was tight, rehearsed, controlled. Midway through the evening, Barrett lifted a crystal flute, voice booming over the clinking glasses. Let's take a moment to recognize what true leadership looks like. He gestured grandly toward himself, as if that were humility. Success doesn't come from late nights or busy hands. It comes from sharp direction. I blinked. Not late nights. Not busy hands. Not the literal months my team spent rebuilding broken infrastructure. He never understood. There it was. The eraser served cold. The room applauded. Someone whistled. I stood near the bar, fingers gripping a flute I hadn't even touched. Lana, my closest friend at Orion Grid, stood a couple feet away beside Barrett. She smiled at his toast, raised her glass, gently clinked it with his, and didn't so much as glance my way. I wanted to believe she hadn't seen me watching, that she was unaware, but the weight in my chest told me otherwise. She knew, and she looked away anyway. We'd dragged each other through 2 layoffs, a product recall, and a near merger that almost gutted our department. We'd spent weekends sleeping on office floors during the Novacell trial, passing energy bars and hope back and forth. But tonight, she clinked glasses with the man who took all the credit, and then walked away. I stepped out onto the balcony. The night air was sharp and cold below. The city pulsed with orange streaks and neon signs. My breath fogged against the glass railing. I pulled out my phone and opened the team chat. A stream of jokes, late-night vents, and memes from exhausted engineers. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to write something. Anything. A quiet. We know what we did, or even a simple, "Thank you, all of you." But I didn't type a word instead. I turned off the screen and gazed up at the stars. They were barely visible, because I understood what this pain was. The hurt not born of criticism, but invisibility. I knew what it felt like to give everything and watch someone else get handed the spotlight. And I knew better than to beg for recognition from someone who'd never give it freely. That night, I walked home. No tears, no screams, just slow, heavy steps burdened by all we'd built and everything he had taken. But beneath the ache, something stirred, a quiet resolve. This wasn't the end. It was the moment I learned who would stand beside me. And who wouldn't? I hadn't planned anything for my 30th birthday after all that. The launch, the party, Barrett's smug toast, Lana's silence. I lacked the energy to celebrate. I took the day off, the first in months. No meetings. No unread messages. Just silence then. At 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed Mr. Harrington, my mother's lawyer, a man with a steady voice, a flawless suit collection, and a habit of only calling when it truly mattered. "Nova," he said gently. "Happy birthday. I know this might be unexpected, but there's something here for you. From your mother, I think it's time. Can you come in today? It'll only take a few minutes." A strange chill ran through me. 20 minutes later, I was riding in a cab headed toward a quiet brick building in Belltown. Harrington's office, perched on the 3rd floor above a French bakery that always smelled like butter, and memories I remembered coming here once with my mom when I was 13. She'd made me sit in the waiting room with a hot cocoa and a comic book while she signed papers in the back. I never asked what they were for now. I was about to find out. Harrington greeted me with that same calm, grandfatherly presence. "You look like her today," he said softly. I gave a weary smile. "Still trying." He led me into his office and slid a small black box sealed with gold wax across the desk, stamped with a single initial, that of my mother's. With hands trembling slightly, I broke the seal. Inside was a single envelope, ivory-colored with softly aged edges. My name was written in her handwriting. I sat and opened it, hearing her voice in every line. "If you're reading this, you've reached 30. And I know the world hasn't always been kind. I'm sorry for that. I always hoped people would see you for who you are, brilliant, steady, full of light. But I also knew there would be moments when those around you would refuse to see, to overlook, silence, or diminish you. If that's happened, as I'm sure it has, then read carefully what comes next, Nova. Even when they didn't see you. I did. I always did. That's when it all broke. Tears streamed silently down my cheeks in hot waves. I didn't sob or make a sound. I simply cried like a dam finally bursting, not from one crack, but from years of silent pressure. I wiped my eyes and flipped the letter over. Behind it was a thicker folded page. Harrington placed a pen beside it. But I wasn't ready to touch it yet. "I waited 5 years to give you this," he said gently. "Your mother wanted you to wait until today." I unfolded the document. It was a trust transfer agreement, effective immediately. 92% of Orion Grid's shares would shift to me, quietly held and structured to stay off the public record until I chose otherwise. I blinked once, twice, then read it repeatedly. "You mean I—" My voice cracked. "Yes." Harrington nodded. "You're not just a former department head. You're the controlling owner of Orion Grid." My breath caught. I wasn't just a name on a layoff list. Not the girl erased from a launch speech. I was the company itself. I pressed my hand to my chest, struggling to breathe through the weight of it all. She always knew, I whispered. Harrington's eyes softened. She trusted your timing. She wanted you to discover the truth on your own. Who would stand with you, and who wouldn't? Once you understood that, this was meant to reach you. I looked down at the signature, Mara Quinn beneath it, a faded postscript. It's your table now. Nova sit tall. I closed my eyes for the first time in months, maybe years. I felt seen, not invisible. And I wasn't finished, yet I didn't rush. Not after the letter, not after the trust papers, not even after Harrington confirmed what I held. 92% of Orion grid, airtight and untouchable, waiting on my command. That kind of power demanded patience. So I didn't scream or flood inboxes or storm offices. That would have been too loud, too easy. No, I needed this quiet, precise, surgical. Just like Mom would have done 2 days later, I met Era Wren in a tiny cafe tucked into a steep corner of Queen Anne Hill. No sign hung outside, just a hand-painted coffee cup on the window and a small chalkboard menu by the door. You only found it if someone whispered its location. And that's why I chose it. Era arrived in a gray wool coat, her hair pinned back in a tight bun. She had that kind of presence that commands attention without shouting. People leaned in when she spoke. She slid into the seat across from me, ordered black coffee, and waited. I handed her a manila folder filled with trust documents, digital access papers, and a note from Harrington. She scanned it silently, fingers moving with practiced precision. When she finished, she set the folder down, met my eyes, and said one word. Damn. A faint smile touched my lips. You've seen worse? I asked. I've seen Massiere, she replied, but nothing cleaner. Nothing this thorough. Your mother didn't just plan succession. She planned for war. I nodded slowly. Her brow lifted. You want him out? Eventually, I said calmly. Not yet. She tilted her head. Not yet? I leaned forward, warming my hands around the cup in front of me. Let him think he's safe. Let him keep strutting through meetings, feeding the board projections wrapped in marketing glitter. Let him keep using my systems, my people, my work. Let him decorate the ship with gold while it quietly rots. Her lips curled into a mix of respect and caution. You're dangerous, she said softly. I'm prepared, I corrected. There's a difference. She pulled out her tablet and opened her calendar. What's the timeline? I want him blindsided, I said. I want the boardroom silent when I speak. I want the floor to shift beneath him mid-sentence. Ara nodded. We'll need 3 steps. Validate voting control, pre-file the shareholder request, and prep leadership review documents. Already underway, I said. Mr. Harrington is looping you in. Want to call the board now? No. She paused, brow furrowing. Nova, you could walk in tomorrow and fire the CEO with one signature. Why wait? I looked out the window where the muted gray Seattle sky pressed down, rain tapping softly against the glass like fingertips on a drum. Timing, I said. It's everything Barrett's smart, but arrogant. Too cocky to spot a quiet knife. I want him so confident he doesn't even glance down until he's bleeding. She leaned back, studying me like a chess master surveying the board. When you strike, she said, it'll be a tsunami. Exactly, I whispered. Tsunamis don't warn. They arrive in silence, then take everything. Era tapped the folder. Call me the second you say the word. I will. I stood, slinging my coat over one shoulder back on the street. I didn't rush or look back. I walked steadily down the hill, the city glittering unknowingly beneath me, because Barrett still thought he'd won, and nothing would be sweeter than watching a man build his empire, one lie at a time, standing atop a trap he never saw. I knew he'd enjoy it. Barrett always craved moments like this. Controlled, theatrical exits where he could play executioner and gentleman the only surprise. He waited until the end of the quarter. He summoned me to his office that morning. The message arrived with no subject, no explanation. Just the number 10 sharp, and to the point, bring your badge. I smiled when I read it. It felt almost poetic how neatly he was walking right into the trap I wore navy, my mother's favorite color, the same blazer I'd worn the day Novacell launched. I pulled my hair back, skipped the lipstick, and packed light. One notepad, my laptop, and a ceramic mug the team had gifted me last year. Its white surface bore purple lettering. Quiet power isn't weak. As I walked the corridor toward Barrett's office, I noticed how few people made eye contact. There's a peculiar silence that settles in a building when people sense blood in the water, but don't want to get wet inside. Barrett stood with his hands clasped behind his back, a thin, gleaming smile like a polished dagger. "Nova," he said smoothly. "Thanks for coming." I didn't reply, just nodded once and took the empty seat across from him. Without missing a beat, he announced, "We've completed the leadership reorganization." Always careful to emphasize careful, as if it mattered. "We've decided to move forward without your role. No thanks. No recognition of the software, strategy, or the saved quarter. Just a blunt knife sliding under ribs." He leaned in slightly, voice dropping like imparting wisdom. "You'll be remembered as dependable, but small. You lacked scale." That's when I felt it. Not rage or grief, but relief. A strange, beautiful release, as if something tightly wound finally snapped. I didn't argue, didn't flinch. I simply looked at him and said, "Thank you for the clarity." It caught him off guard briefly. His mouth twitched. He pushed a folder across the desk. "HR has your severance details. Your system access ends at 5 p.m. I'm sure you'll land somewhere steady." I reached into my bag, pulled out the mug, and placed it beside my photo frame, the one of my mother standing beneath the Orion Grid launch banner, scissors mid-cut, her hand resting on my small shoulder. Barrett didn't even glance at it. I rose, straightened my coat, and extended my hand. He shook it briefly, cool and mechanical. Stepping into the hallway, the air felt heavier than before, as if the building itself sensed a shift. Near the elevators, I passed Lana. She pretended to check her phone, but I saw her fingers tremble slightly. She didn't look up or speak. Once, we'd shared midnight ramen over client disaster calls, laughed through broken prototypes, promised to always have each other's backs. Now, she couldn't meet my eyes. I paused just long enough to say, not cruelly but finally, "You made your choice." Her head tilted barely perceptibly, but she didn't answer. The elevator doors opened. I stepped in alone. By the time I reached the ground floor, the sky outside Seattle had opened up. Rain fell thin and constant, whispering softly. I didn't open my umbrella or rush for cover. I stepped into the downpour slowly, deliberately. My heels clicked softly on the sidewalk, my bag light against my shoulder. The mug warmed in my hand where I held it close behind me. The storm raged, but inside, there was stillness. The world believed I had lost everything. What they didn't know, what Barrett didn't know, was that he'd just handed me the cleanest exit possible. No baggage, no tangled contracts, no blood on my hands. Just silence and a storm of my own quietly gathering Tuesday morning, 9:57 a.m. Barrett thought he was about to run a quarterly strategy review. He was dressed for it. Navy three-piece, no tie, and that power watch he wore when he wanted to look presidential later. I heard he'd even rehearsed a joke about visionaries on the road ahead. Let him rehearse. It wouldn't be a review waiting for him. It would be a reckoning. I arrived 2 minutes early. Security didn't question me. The receptionist blinked twice, but said nothing. I passed through the familiar glass doors of Orion Grid with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to claim. Mr. Harrington met me by the elevator, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing a smile so faint it was almost invisible. "They're all inside," he said. He'd started early, thinking it made him look driven. "Let him drive into a wall," I replied. He didn't laugh, but his eyes suggested he wanted to. The elevator doors opened on the 22nd floor. Barrett's voice echoed through the frosted glass, loud, animated, drowning in self-congratulation. "The uptick in retention is a testament to our aggressive reshaping of internal priorities," he said, pacing like he owned the oxygen in the room. I pushed open the door. Click 12 heads turned. The room fell silent. I walked in with steady steps, my heels soft against polished oak. The Navy suit was the same one I wore the day I was fired. My mother's badge was pinned just below my lapel, and in my hands was a thick manila folder, heavy with destiny. Barrett's voice faltered. His smile twitched. "Elena," he said, fake warmth already cracking. "This meeting is for board members only." I placed the folder on the table and met his eyes. "Exactly," I said. "That's why I'm here." A hush spread over the room. Mr. Dalton, the oldest board member, white-haired, sharp-eyed, someone who'd stood beside my mother when Orion Grid was just blueprints and rented office chairs, leaned forward and opened the folder. His eyes scanned the pages. His hand trembled slightly. "Is this—" he began, voice dry and cautious. "Is this real?" I nodded once, razor-sharp and calm. "Yes, 92% of company shares legally transferred through a trust, activated on my 30th birthday. Notarized, filed, fully valid as of today." Barrett's face drained of color. "You can't be serious," he snapped. This is a stunt." "It's a correction," I said, long overdue. He turned to the others, desperation creeping in. "You're not going to let her. This isn't leadership. It's a coup." Mr. Harrington cleared his throat gently. "As legal counsel, I confirm these documents are binding. Ms. Quinn is now the majority shareholder, with the right to call or direct board meetings, including matters of executive oversight." I leaned forward just enough to anchor the weight of the moment. "This meeting," I said, "concerns the future of Orion Grid integrity performance. And yes, leadership, which is exactly why I'm here." Barrett scoffed. "You don't know the first thing about leadership. You're emotional, quiet, passive." "No," I said, voice crystal clear. "I was strategic. I watched, I listened. I waited while you burned through talent, smothered innovation, and gutted the values this company was built on." I turned to the board. "Starting today, that ends." Mr. Dalton looked down at the trust documents, then back at me, before slowly, deliberately closing the folder and nodding. He acknowledged the motion with a nod. Barrett's chair screeched as he abruptly stood, fists clenched and eyes wild. "You'll regret this," he spat. I held steady, not flinching. "You've mistaken silence for weakness," I replied. "But silence is a weapon you never saw coming." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy and thick, the kind that shifts the air like a storm ready to break. I turned to the panel on the wall and clicked the projector remote. The screen flickered on behind me. "This isn't personal," I said, voice steady but firm. "This is data." Slide 1 showed employee turnover over 18 months. The line soared sharply upward since Barrett took his role. Voluntary departures jumped 47%, including engineers, developers, and account managers. Many with 10 or more years of service exit interviews pointed to toxic leadership, fear-driven culture, and lack of recognition as recurring reasons. Slide 2 displayed HR complaint logs. 4 formal harassment reports were filed last year, all quietly closed without escalation. 3 named the same executive. 2 involved threats linked to performance reviews. None reached this board. Murmurs rustled around the room. Barrett crossed his arms. "You're spinning facts," he accused. I met his gaze without wavering. "I'm presenting the truth." Slide 3 appeared. Client loss. Apex Energy's contract termination. The screen showed an email chain highlighted in yellow. The client's VP of Operations wrote, "We're ending our contract early. We no longer trust Orion Grid's leadership culture to align with our values." One sentence cost the company a $6 million partnership. I clicked the remote once more. The final slide faded in, a simple black background with white text, center aligned. Leadership isn't control through fear. It's creating a space where people grow. I faced the board. I didn't come here for revenge. I came for accountability. Barrett laughed, sharp, bitter, unhinged. "You came to make a point. Congratulations, you're CEO now. Good luck holding it together with coddled employees and weak systems." I ignored him. This vote isn't about power. It's about preservation. I glanced at Mr. Dalton. His jaw was tight, fingers drumming slowly on the table's edge. I looked around the boardroom, faces I'd worked under, those I'd fought for respect from. "No one wanted it to come to this," I said, "but here we are. You've seen the numbers, the damage, the silence you all endured while this man turned leadership into theater." I pulled the final document from my folder. Simple, 1 page. As majority shareholder, I'm calling for an immediate vote of no confidence in Barrett Quinn as CEO of Orion Grid, effective upon confirmation. Barrett stood abruptly. "This is a witch hunt," he growled. "Baseless, childish. You're emotional." "No," I replied coldly. "I'm done being silent." I placed the paper before Mr. Dalton. He read quietly, then looked up and nodded. "Motion recorded," he said. "And with your 92% shareholding." He trailed off. He didn't need to finish. Barrett scanned the room for support. None came. He fixed me with one last, furious glare. "You'll regret this." I didn't move or blink. "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll sleep at night." He spun on his heel and stormed out. When the door slammed, the room exhaled. The email went out just after sunrise. "All staff meeting, 9 a.m. Main hall attendance encouraged." No subject line, no explanation, just that. By the time I stepped onto the stage, the room was packed, rows of employees in branded jackets, worn name badges, coffee in hand, some confused, others wary, a few hopeful. The overhead lights were harsh. The mic buzzed. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady. I was fired because I didn't fit their idea of leadership. The room went silent. I was told I was too quiet, too careful, lacking vision. I let the words hang. No slides, no stats, just the space between us. But I didn't come back to dwell on that. I took a breath and scanned the sea of tired faces, mostly strangers, but all familiar in the ways that matter. I came back because I fit something else. That was the first shift. A collective exhale, a straightening of spines, the unspoken thought. She sees us. "I came back," I said, "because I'm like you. I've stayed late, cleaned up messes that weren't mine, watched credit go to someone louder, bitten my tongue in meetings, walked halls where no one looked up." Silence again. A few exchanged glances, eyes blinking harder than usual. "I want to tell you a story." I continued. 2 months ago, a janitor named Eric was replacing a light in the east stairwell. I was rushing down the stairs, stressed, laptop open, almost walked right past him. But something made me stop. I said, "Good morning." Just 2 words. I paused. He started crying. A murmur rippled through the room. I asked what was wrong. He said no one had spoken to him, no greeting, no thanks for 8 years. He said he felt invisible. I swallowed hard. "He exists just like you do. and I see you." Something broke open. Then applause. Then thunderous applause. The kind that carries relief, not just noise. It wasn't for me, it was for them, for finally being seen, finally mattering. I let it wash over us before raising my hand gently to speak again. Starting today, Orion Grid isn't just a tech company. It's a people company we rebuild from the inside out, together. There were real smiles. Some stood, some cried. For the first time in years, the building felt alive. I'll be in the cafeteria this afternoon. No schedule, no layers. Just me and a notebook. Tell me what you need. Tell me what you've never been asked. We start with listening. More applause, more hope. In the front row, a young developer with ink-stained fingers whispered to a coworker, "We're back." For the first time since my mother died, I believed it. The first thing I did was bring back the mural painted in the west stairwell during Orion Grid's 5th year. It was a sweeping blend of colors, circuitry, and silhouettes of real employees from that era. My mother had commissioned it to honor the invisible hands behind every breakthrough Barrett had it painted over. "Too messy," he said, "not aligned with the new brand." But now, the wall was alive again. We found the original artist, an employee, and some from facilities, now semi-retired, and gave her free rein. She cried when we handed her the brush. The second thing I launched was Silent Gratitude Week. No emails, no speeches, no grandstanding, just handwritten thank you notes. Supervisors wrote them for janitors. Designers wrote them for it. A marketing assistant left one taped to the breakroom fridge. To whoever keeps the oat milk stocked, "Thank you, I see you, and I appreciate all that you do." Those simple words multiplied quietly, like stars appearing one by one, slowly melting the chill that had settled over the building. Then, one morning, Maya walked back through the doors. Her ID badge had long been deactivated, her office cleared out during Barrett's restructuring. But when I called and said plainly, "We need you," she didn't hesitate. She returned to her old desk, took a brief moment to take it all in, then dove into work as if she'd never left. Now carrying the title Director of Employee Culture, Maya was the heart of this place. And I was finished allowing anyone to erase that ever again. Next came Kevin, the engineer Barrett dismissed as too principled to innovate. The man who had quietly crafted the foundation of Novacell's success, and then watched another claim the glory I called him the day after my hall speech. He answered on the second ring. "Nova," his voice thick with disbelief. "We have work to do, you in?" Without hesitation, he was back, leading R&D, driving innovation, mentoring, rebuilding every week. He leaves a note on my desk. One breakthrough, one shout-out to a colleague who helped him get there the 3rd week. His note read, "Breakthrough. We cracked thermal latency," with credit to Sophia in QA, who stayed late even when no one asked. These moments mattered. We didn't transform the company overnight, but we rewired its heart. And slowly, that mattered more than any quarterly chart one ordinary Tuesday afternoon. No speeches, no meetings. I stepped into an elevator where a young intern stood nervously clutching a box of prototype samples. She looked barely 22, eyes wide. As the doors closed, she looked up and whispered, "I used to think no one saw us until you spoke. I didn't even know your name." I smiled and replied, "Now you always will." Back in my office, a folded note awaited on my desk. No signature, no flourish, just a simple sentence penned in neat handwriting. "You didn't just save the company, you saved us." I held it for a long moment, not because it was poetic, but because it rang true. We were doing more than fixing broken systems. We were healing people. That was the legacy my mother had believed in. Exactly 1 year later, I stood atop Orion Grid's headquarters as its CEO. The office hadn't changed much since I last occupied it as an employee. But everything felt different now. The energy was warmer, more vibrant. The walls no longer echoed empty sounds. They listened. Sunlight poured through the expansive floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow that only dawn can offer outside. The city stretched quiet and vast, just beginning to wake. Inside, the only sound was the gentle hum of the monitor behind me. The Q4 report flashed on screen. Revenue up 42%, retention at 6-1. I read those figures twice, not to confirm, but to absorb their meaning. They were no longer mere numbers. They were proof that leading with empathy isn't weakness, proof that patient, steady leadership outpaces noise and ego, proof that a company can be both compassionate and high-performing. I turned to look at the portrait hanging behind my desk. My mother's. It wasn't a stiff, posed photograph. No formal boardroom glare or executive posture, just a candid moment captured during our first product demo, a breeze tousling her hair, eyes crinkling with that familiar spark of hope and tenacity. That photo was taken the day she secured our first client, back when Orion Grid operated out of a rented shipping container. It had once hung in the old lobby until Barrett had it taken down. Now it watched over the company again. I stepped closer, tracing my fingers gently along the frame's edge. "We did it," I whispered. "No audience, no fanfare, just her, me, and the morning light. We're home, Mom. We're whole again." And indeed, we were. Orion Grid wasn't broken anymore. Its people thrived. Its culture breathed new life. Its mission was back on course, not simply to create cleaner technology, but to build it with purpose. The place that once made me feel invisible had become the stage where I learned to stand tall. Now, I didn't need to shout or shine. I only needed to be here, quietly leading, fiercely observing, listening more than I spoke. That was enough. That was everything. That